Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get restarted with this next topic. And as you guys can hear, we have some impermanence with some hammer. So I'm going to get restarted. I'm going to go ahead and get restarted. And I said we have some impermanence here with the hammer. Sounds like somebody's doing some work. So you guys will need to train your minds to not crave, permanent sounds or lack of sounds. These kind of things happen, right? You can be teaching and boom, 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 boom. You can hear some hammering and stuff like this. So just train your mind to be focused and not be affected by any kind of impermanence that is happening in the environment. Okay. So those of you guys at home, I don't know if you guys can hear, we got someone hammering, which is completely fine. It's just impermanence. We know it's not going to last permanently. So that silence that we had earlier, or at least the kind of ability to teach without hammering, that's not permanent either. So all these things are impermanent, right? All right. So this topic of identifying cravings, cultivating non-craving, and analysis of the mind. This is where I teach you how to go in, identify your cravings, and then be able to eliminate them through almost surgical elimination. And it works in about 80 or 90% of the situations. There are some situations where you can't do what I'm going to teach you, but it's okay because this is a really helpful thing for you. In terms of your development on the path to enlightenment, the meditation, the Eightfold Path, all these things are important, but this here is actually going to really help you to go in and surgically remove things. And some of you guys I know just learned this on Sunday because I taught it on Sunday as part of the group learning program. It just so happens that it's part of this course as well, because you wouldn't be able to have harmonious relationships without knowing how to eliminate your attachments. These relationships that you're in, it's going to bring up attachments for you. In situations where you're in a relationship and you're getting agitated or annoyed or frustrated or irritated, you should pay attention to those things. Those things that are happening, it's not that person that's causing you to be agitated or annoyed or frustrated. Whatever is going on in those relationships, that's just giving you an indication of what your cravings, desires, attachments are, so that then you can go in and do what it is that I'm going to share with you here. So because I never know who's going to be in one class or another and who's learned what, I start off this particular class just explaining what a craving, desire, attachment is. We talked about this yesterday, and looking around the room, most of you guys were here yesterday. There's a couple of people here that weren't here yesterday, but you guys have studied with me before. Do you guys know what a craving, desire, attachment is? This longing and yearning, this chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be a certain way. Is there anyone who doesn't know what a craving, desire, attachment is? No. Okay. So I'm going to just skip over this because this is helping to remind students of what a craving, desire, attachment is. That's that outward seeking, the mind longing and yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. It's the mind thinking the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases and chases and chases. And if it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. So now I'll move into some more things about this. So the number one goal on the path to enlightenment is to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. Of course, you need to cultivate wisdom. That is the primary goal. And then cultivating the wisdom, it's going to teach you how to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. Because countless times in the teachings of the Buddha, when he's either asked or he's just talking, he says, what I taught is the elimination of discontentedness. That's what he taught. That's everything that he taught, is how to eliminate this discontentedness. Well, you need to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments to eliminate discontentedness. That's what he actually taught you how to do. So eliminating your cravings, desires, attachments is a number one goal on the path to enlightenment. But how could you eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments if you didn't know how to identify them? That's what this particular little class is going to teach you how to do, is how to identify them, because you wouldn't be able to actually eliminate them if you couldn't identify them. And sometimes a teacher is helping you identify your cravings, but you need to be able to develop the skill and ability, just like you develop the skill and ability to do meditation. You need to develop this ability too, to look inward and be introspective and be able to understand what's going on in your own mind. That's part of developing your mind, because someone can't get into your mind and tell you exactly what your cravings are. You're going to need to be able to identify them yourself. So just like you meditate and you've been developing that skill for a particular period of time, you're going to need to develop this skill too of how to identify your cravings. Breathing mindfulness meditation is a generalized training to help you eliminate cravings, desires, attachment. That's a consistent, ongoing training that is generally helping you to eliminate all cravings, desires, attachments. So you're going to need to build up that practice. And this is going to help you develop right mindfulness or awareness of mind and help you apply right effort, that in the moment when you're experiencing any particular bout of discontentedness, you can cut it off and let it go. Without the breathing mindfulness meditation, you wouldn't be able to do what it is that I'm going to teach you as part of this class. So typically by the time someone's studying this, they've already been learning and practicing for a number of months. But it's okay if you haven't been learning and practicing with me for that long, you can still learn this because this is something that's going to help you. But just know that you're going to need to build up your breathing mindfulness meditation in order for what I'm going to describe to you to actually be really effective, because you need to be able to train the mind to let go. And you're going to also need generosity. Generosity is helping your mind to let go as well. We're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. So the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, that right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, that's going to help you develop the mind and get this discipline to be able to control the mind. And it's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You're not going to be able to just meditate once and immediately be able to control your mind. One of the biggest challenges on the path to enlightenment as you get going for a number of months and maybe even years is intellectually you can understand what you should be doing with the mind, but the mind just won't do it. Right? This is where it's real challenging because you haven't accumulated enough benefits of the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity and all the other factors that you're learning and practicing. The mind just hasn't accumulated enough benefits yet. So there can be this agitation and frustration because the mind wants to do this particular thing that you intellectually know that you should do, but the mind just won't do it. You just can't get it done. So you're going to go through this period of time where intellectually you'll know things, but you won't actually be able to do it with the mind because the mind's just untrained and undisciplined. So you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path, the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration to be able to slowly get the mind more and more disciplined so that you can do what I'm about to teach you. Okay? So the way that you can approach eliminating your attachments and almost surgically removing them is you can use the discontentedness that you experience like a red light on the dashboard of your car. If you had a car and there was a red light that came on the dashboard, you would probably pull over and you would probably check it out. You would either pop the hood yourself if you have some skills to kind of look around and see what's going on, or you might take your car to the mechanic and this person has more skills than you and they'd be able to figure out what's wrong with it and maybe even fix it for you, right? So this is what you would do with a car. You wouldn't keep driving that car with that red light on. You wouldn't just ignore it. You would pull over and investigate and figure out what's going on. Well, the discontentedness that you experience, the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even those conditioned pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, this should be the red light on the dashboard, alerting you that something in your mind, there's a craving there. There's some craving or multiple cravings that are producing that particular discontentedness. And you should use that as a red light on your dashboard of your car. It's an indicator that, hey, you've got craving, desire, attachment in your mind. Because it's not possible for you to become discontent without craving, desire, attachment. So any time the mind is discontent, there is a craving, desire, attachment there. Even just feeling uncomfortable, feeling off, feeling icky, there's some craving, desire, attachment there in the mind. So you can use that as the red light on your dashboard. And now when you're noticing that discontentedness starting to arise, first as a bodily sensation, then it's going to become a feeling, then it's going to affect the condition of your mind, and there's this mental object like we were talking about yesterday. What you'd like to do is go through this process that when that discontentedness is arising, cut it off and let it go. You would like to do that with any and all discontentedness that is arising. You should get to the point where you don't even have to think about it. Just any discontentedness is arising, you just cut it off and let it go. And of course, you're not going to be able to do that right away. You're going to need to build up your mental discipline to be able to do that. But ultimately, that's what you would like to get to, is just cut it off and let it go. And you'd like to cut it off as a bodily sensation. That's ideal, right? But you're not always going to spot it as a bodily sensation because you're in the process of accumulating the benefits of your meditation and everything else that you're developing to be able to get to that point. So sometimes it is going to become a feeling, right? You are going to experience discontent feelings on your way to enlightenment. So when these things are occurring, try to cut it off and let it go there. Don't allow the mind to dwell. That's where I was talking yesterday about redirecting your mind. You're watching the news, you feel the frustration building as a bodily sensation. You'd like to cut that off and let it go. But if you can't, it might become a feeling. Try to cut it off and let it go there. But one of the things you can do is you can redirect the mind. You can turn off the TV and go out for a walk, or go for a bike ride, or go in your house and go read a book or something like this, right? No need to sit there and dwell in those discontent feelings, because sometimes people get agitated when they're watching the news or something else like this, or any time there's any discontentedness, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. And catching it sooner and sooner as a bodily sensation is what you'd like to do. When you get to the point that you can cut it off and let it go repetitively as a bodily sensation, you're very close to enlightenment. Within the next 1 to 3 years, you will get to enlightenment. When you can every single time identify the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness, and you can cut it off and let it go there, you will be getting to enlightenment within 1 to 3 years. But it's going to take you time to build up to that point that you can now notice the bodily sensations every time the mind is about to be discontent. So that's why it's going to take you some time to get to that point. So that's what you would like to do as a step 1. Then step 2. Once your mind is calm, and that might take a few minutes, it might take a few hours, it might take a few days, you'd like to look inward. You'd like to start reflecting. What were the cravings, desires, attachments that caused this discontent feeling to arise? Even if you cut it off as a bodily sensation, it didn't become a feeling, but there was something in there that was causing that to arise. And you'd like to look inward and start to reflect and figure out what that is. What are you attached to? There's something the mind's longing, yearning for. There's some craving for permanence, something that the mind wants, and you'd like to figure out what that is. Then once you figure out what it is, and sometimes it's multiple things, it's not always just one thing, it's oftentimes more than one. Once you figure out what that is, then you move to step 3, which is you develop a specific plan to eliminate this particular craving, desire, attachment. Oftentimes putting the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. And I'm going to give you some examples to help you understand this. But all the while, you would like to be practicing breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity every day. You would like to do 2 or 3 meditations per day for 30 minutes or more, gradually building up to that. And then each day, you would like to be practicing generosity, some form of generosity, giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. You're going to need to be doing that each day, frequently, right? So find the middle with your generosity and gradually work towards building up your generosity. That's going to train your mind to let go. All right. And then after you've put together this plan and you're executing this plan, you're going to need to repeat this process for each incident of discontentedness as it's arising in the mind. And you're going to need to seek guidance with the teacher in some cases to be able to identify your cravings. Sometimes you're going to need to come to me and say, hey, David, I had this discontentedness happen the other day. Here's the cravings, desires, attachments that I think that are in there. And here's the plan that I'm planning to actually do. Does this sound reasonable to you? Is this what you would typically do? And then I'm going to either say yes, or hey, think about this, or consider this. Or you might come to me and say, hey, David, here's some situation. Here's the discontentedness that I experienced, but I can't figure out what the cravings, desires, attachments are. Can you help me figure this out? Right? And that might be what you need from me. So you're going to need that several times before your mind actually is able to develop this skill. You're going to need to develop the skill to identify your cravings. But maybe 2, 3, 4 times you do this, you'll have the skill down. You'll be able to start looking inward. But I've even had students sometimes after even studying with me a year or so, there's a particular situation where they'll contact me and say, hey, this particular thing happened. Can you help me figure out my attachment? So you can always contact me at any point and I will help you to be able to look inward to figure out what is it that your mind's craving. Okay, so I'll give you some examples of how I use this so that you can see how it works. And then we can maybe have a little discussion, a little group activity where if you'd like to share some of your situations that you've been in, then I can help you to see that you've identifying your cravings and that you're able to put together a plan to eliminate this from the mind. So there was a period of time where one time I left my home and I was driving a car and I reached down and went for my phone and it wasn't there. Right. And I got this fear, and this fear came up in my mind. And I happened to be at this red light. Actually, I happened to be at a stoplight. Right. And I was at this stoplight and this fear came up, and I was able to cut it off and let it go right away because I had been practicing up to that point. And then right away I started reflecting. I was like, what's the mind craving here? What does it want? And I was like, the phone. It's craving the phone to be permanent. And right away my mind wanted to turn around because I was at a red light and I could have U-turned and been back to my house within 5 minutes. Right away, that's what the mind wanted to do. It wanted to go get the phone. And I realized, like, nope, that's not going to solve the problem. Going to get the phone doesn't solve the problem because the craving is still going to persist. I needed to train the mind to get rid of this craving where it wasn't craving the phone to be permanent. So that day I was planning to be outside for like an hour and a half to do a couple of errands, but instead I decided to stay out longer. I decided I was going to continue in my day. I went to have some food. I went to the movies. I went to do a whole bunch of things. I stayed outside for like 5 or 6 hours, elongating the amount of time that I was outside because I needed to put the mind in the situation that it didn't want to be in. It didn't want to be outside without the phone. So I needed to put the mind in that situation and train it to let go and that this phone isn't permanent. So after 5 or 6 hours of being outside, I eventually went home. And when I went home, I didn't just run to the phone and check out the phone. I actually went home. I think I watched a little TV. I got some more food. I maybe played with my son or whatever else I did. And then maybe 30 minutes, an hour or so, 2 hours, I went and got the phone. I checked it out. Right. And I was like, okay, now I waited about 2 or 3 days. And then I did it again. I intentionally left the phone at home this time. And when I intentionally left the phone, I wasn't scared. I didn't have any fear when I went outside, but I noticed some agitation. The mind wasn't comfortable. It just was like, it just kind of wanted the phone. But I went ahead and went outside. I did all the different things I was going to be doing and all that kind of stuff. And then once again, when I came home, I didn't just run to the phone and check to see what was on the phone. I just left it there, did other stuff, and then 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours later, I went and looked at the phone. And then I did this again. I did it like 2, 3, 4 times. And then I was pretty confident that I had eliminated the attachment because after, 3, 4, 5 times of doing this, I didn't notice any discontentedness in the mind. I was perfectly comfortable going outside without the phone. But then about 2 months after that, I accidentally left the phone at home again. And I reached down for the phone and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh well. And I just kept on going. I didn't even give it a second thought. And there was no discontentedness. There was no fear. There was no agitation or anything. So I was convinced at that point that this attachment had been eliminated from the mind. But about a year after that, I accidentally had dropped the phone and the screen broke. And I looked at the phone and I smiled and I was like, of course you broke because you're impermanent, right? And I was completely joyful. There was no, no upset, no agitation, no frustration. And I knew like I wasn't attached to this phone anymore. And fortunately I had another phone, so I didn't have to go out and buy one. So I could just use this other phone. But this is how you can know that your mind has eliminated a certain attachment, because initially when my phone, something happened to it, I had all this fear. But now through this process, the mind had slowly let go, right? So what I did is in the moment when I was sitting at the traffic light, I noticed the discontentedness, the fear come up, I cut it off and let it go, right? Then I reflected and looked inward and said, what are the cravings, desires, attachments here? The mind's craving that phone. It's longing, yearning. The attachment isn't the phone itself. It's not the object. It's the mind longing, yearning for it and wanting it to be permanent. So when I realized that, I decided to put my mind in that situation where it didn't want to be, which is outside without this phone. Then when I came home, I didn't go to the phone right away. I didn't long and yearn for it. Instead, I continued to develop this plan to put the mind in this situation. And I did this over multiple days, multiple sessions. I went outside without the phone, right? And then I did that multiple times until I was at the point where I could tell the mind had eliminated its discontentedness. So there's a good chance that you're attached to your phone. If you pick up your phone a lot, if you check your messages, if when you misplace your phone, your mind is all shaken up, you're like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? Where's my phone? Your mind's attached to your phone. So you already know that. So I would suggest you go right to developing this plan. Sometimes leave your phone at home. Go outside without your phone. Depending on how old you were or are, you might have already done that when you were a kid, but now you've gotten attached to the phone. Because that was one of the things I had to remind myself. I was like, why am I so scared? When I was a kid, I didn't have a mobile phone. I used to go outside all the time without a phone. It wasn't until I was about 23 that I was about 19, I got my first mobile phone, right? So I used to go outside without a mobile phone. Why do I need one now, right? So put your mind in that situation where you go outside without your mobile phone, right? And do this multiple times. And then when you come home, don't check it right away. This is how you get liberated or free, right? When we talk about fetters, this shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball, that's essentially what you've got. When you have this craving to your phone, you've got this shackle. You're shackled to this phone, right? And you're maybe constantly looking at it and wondering, what's on there. So if you leave it home and you go out for an extended period of time, this will train your mind to let go. And it'll probably feel uncomfortable as you're doing this, but you need to walk through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. You're going to have some painful feelings to get to enlightenment. I describe this like the mafia, right? If you join the mafia, it's going to be really happy when you join. Perhaps you've got all these new friends and all this protection and all this ability to make money. But when you walk out of the mafia, it's going to be painful, right? It's going to be painful to walk away from it, right? So it's the same thing, that your mind has already got these cravings and you're already getting certain pleasant feelings from looking at your phone constantly. So when you start separating from this phone, it's going to be painful, right? And you're going to need to experience that. That is your karma. That's the results of your decisions of having had these cravings, that you're going to need to walk away from it, just like walking out of the mafia. And it's going to be painful as you're doing that. But on the other side of that, that's where the fresh air is. That's where the joy and the peacefulness is. If you're constantly attached to this phone and you can only have pleasant feelings when you got your phone in your hand, this is where your mind's not liberated. You're tied down. You're burdened. You have this fetter where you're attached to this phone. So to get liberated and free from it, you're going to have to walk through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. So there's going to be some painful feelings walking out of the cravings, desires, attachments. For those of you guys that know about the Wizard of Oz, right, the yellow brick road, there was problems along the yellow brick road, right? There was issues that had to be dealt with. It's not just this wonderful journey on this yellow brick road. And while there's definitely enjoyment on the path to enlightenment, there's some real struggles and some real challenges. And the Buddha teaches you, don't shrink back from those struggles, because if you run away from the struggles, you're just going to ensure that they continue. But if you turn around and you walk towards the struggles and the difficulties, this is where your mind can cultivate wisdom. You can learn and you can grow. But if you run away from a struggle, you're just ensuring it's going to happen again and again and again, because the mind hasn't cultivated the wisdom that it needs in order to overcome it. So where you're in a relationship and you're getting triggered in a certain relationship, your cravings are getting triggered, that's like a really good relationship for you, potentially, depending on what's going on, right? Because that person is like a little like a little teacher. Right? They're like a little teacher. They're showing you like, hey, I don't like it when you say that. I don't like it when you do this. I don't like it when you do that. Those are all your cravings, and they're helping you to see those things. And you can use that as insight. So when you're noticing discontentedness arising, that's the red light. That's showing you, hey, you got a craving, desire, attachment there. Cut that off. Cut it off. Cut it off as a bodily sensation. Then when your mind gains its composure, look inward and reflect and figure out, what are the cravings, desires, attachments? And sometimes it's multiple, right? And then put a plan together to put your mind in that situation so that then your mind can be trained to let it go. And then continue to do that plan until you see that the mind doesn't have any discontentedness associated with that particular thing anymore. Okay, so this is the process. Any questions on this? Yes.
Okay, hi, David. I have one question. Once you identify a craving, does it make any sense to try to explore or to reflect on why you have that craving, or just cut it off?
Just cut it off. The first one is just cut it off. When you're reflecting and looking inward, you can uncover the cravings. If it helps you to look at it like sometimes like your childhood or things like this, But at the end of the day, you still need to get it out of the mind. It doesn't really matter. What's happening is the mind is holding on, it's clinging, it's craving, and you got to get rid of it. Whether it came from your childhood or it came from that boyfriend-girlfriend relationship or some boss or some situation, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because you got to get rid of it. But if it helps you and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that relationship, I did pick up that craving. Oh, yeah, I shouldn't do that anymore. If that helps you and it helps you to cultivate wisdom so that in your new relationships, you're not doing that, sure, go ahead and do that. There's no harm in doing what you said, but just understand that you don't have to figure that out in order to get liberated from the craving.
Thank you.
Every day I experience some anger or frustration when I watch the news, but I'm addicted to news. Every day I watch the news, and I don't understand this behavior. I don't know if I should stop watching the news.
Okay, this is perfect. This takes us into the next part, which is I'm going to open up to you guys to have a group activity where you can share some of your experiences where you're getting discontentedness, and you can either share, this is the situation, these are the cravings, desires, and attachments that I think it is, and this is the plan that I think I should do, and then I'll help you with that. That's one approach. You could also say, this is the discontentedness, this is what I think the cravings are, but I don't know what I should do in order to solve it. Or you might just do like what you're sharing is like, hey, I just get discontent here and I have no idea what's going on, and what should I do? So that's what I'm going to help you with. So thanks for kicking this off. So any of you guys can share the same kind of thing. So if you are watching the news and you're getting discontent, what is probably the case, and this is where you need to look inward, is you have a craving, a desire, attachment for the world to be a certain way. And when you see the news and it's not that way, your mind's getting discontent. Like maybe you want all children to be safe, or all politicians to function this way, or is that the one, the politicians? I saw your hand, right? So you want the people to be a certain way. There's a craving, desire, attachment, and they're not going to be that way. It's not possible for everyone to be the way you want them to be, right? So what I would suggest you do, and this is going to be challenging for you, but this is what I had to do too, because I used to get angry at the news as well, is completely go away from the news for an extended period of time. Probably 3 months, 6 months, maybe even upwards of a year. That's what I had to do. I went away from it for an entire year. And then don't worry, you're going to be informed. People are going to tell you. When you go to work and when you do things, people are going to tell you what's going on in the world. So you don't have to worry about that. So don't watch the news, right? So do that for an extended period of time. But all the while, be practicing breathing mindfulness, meditation, generosity, training your mind to let go. And then at some point, your mind, you will have some confidence that it's potentially let go and that you think that this craving is gone. I would say minimum of 3 months, probably upwards of 6 months to a year, it will let go, right? And then you can slowly integrate the news back into your life, because there's no harm in watching the news and being informed. You just need to get rid of the craving. But as you're integrating the news back into your life, you need to be attentive to the mind, and you need to do this slowly. So maybe watch the news for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and then put it down, and then walk away from it for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 days, right? And now watch the news again for maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then put it down for 2 or 3 or 4 days. And then you do this, and then you can slowly increase the amount of news that you're experiencing and that's coming in. But at any point, if you see any agitation or frustration or irritation, then you need to go like 2 or 3, 4, 5 weeks without it again. So you kind of gradually bring it back in like that. And you stay attentive to the mind while you're watching the news. And if at any point you see discontentedness, cut it off, let it go, walk away from it, and then give yourself a week or 2 or 3 before you bring it back in a little bit at a time. So that's how you would do it. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Attachment, but I think it's slightly different. Same situation, right? I probably the first thing I woke up is get the news. I think there's two. One is I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on in the world and in a certain deep discussion.
I want to be the person could engage conversation with my friends. Even the person could bring some very interesting insights. So I want to keep updated every day. Another thing I noticed is I also feel bored. If I don't read news, what I'm going to do? I feel that I just wasted my time.
Yeah.
That's kind of my my situation.
Okay, so that's the craving, right? The mind wants this news to be permanent. You want this insight. You want this understanding of what's going on in the world. And when you don't have it, you're saying that you feel bored or you feel like not as involved. So it's the same thing, that you're going to need to distance yourself from this particular object. The Buddha talks about this in his teachings, that in order to eliminate any craving, desire, attachment, it's essentially a two-step process. It's distancing yourself from the object and then training your mind to eliminate it. So you need to distance yourself from the news, just like I described here, and then ultimately 3 months, 6 months, a year later, slowly integrate it back in. Because right now your mind can't be content when you don't have the news. You feel bored, or you feel like you're not as involved in the conversation. So you're going to need to be able to see that, yes, there are other things in the world besides watching the news. And you're going to need to find those things. Is it reading a book? Is it going out to the park? Is it going to the movies? You're going to need to find those other things so that you can be just as content with the news as without it. But you don't have the ability to do that as long as you keep, watching the news or looking at the news or checking out the news. You're going to need to distance yourself from it, train your mind to let it go with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, and then slowly reintegrate it back into your life. And at any point that you see discontentedness coming in, you're going to need to distance yourself from it again, and then slowly bring it back in again.
May I ask you a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
I understood, and I think I'm going to definitely practice what you suggested. To me, I have another tendency, like a pattern in my life is actually I don't really just watch the news. Usually I brush my teeth while watching the news or listen to the news. While I'm driving, while I'm listening to the news. So I'm thinking it's more like what you mentioned, the so-called like multitasks. So in that case is I'm not really good living in that moment, I guess. Yeah, so that's the singleness of mind that we were talking about yesterday with right concentration. So you're going to need to get used to that when I'm brushing my teeth, you're just brushing your teeth, that your mind's not doing something, trying to do something else. Or when you're eating, you're just eating. Or when you're in a conversation like this, you're just focusing on the conversation. And that's that steel rod with the wood grinding back and forth and getting a deeper and deeper groove, because that's what's going to develop your concentration and your focus. If you allow the mind to bounce around like this, then it's going to continue to persist with craving. You're going to have a lack of concentration, a lack of memory, and all these other things. So you would like to get more and more used to just doing one thing at a time. And when you do that, you might be bored. Again, right? Like when you're brushing your teeth and you don't have the news playing, you might notice some boredom coming up in your mind. That's not the cause, right? That's a symptom. That's the problem, is the boredom. The cause of it is the craving. It's longing and yearning to have some kind of stimulation while you're brushing your teeth. So you're going to need to walk through that fire. You're going to need to walk through that boredom to get to the other side where the mind actually releases its craving. And now it can just be completely content when you're brushing your teeth and you don't have any boredom coming up. Yep.
I have two situations. The first situation, I applied for a big soccer club in Germany some days ago, and I didn't think that they answer me. And yesterday evening, they answered me per email that I have an interview on Wednesday online, and I just know that I have like this strong emotions after that. I notice emotions that I have a lot of heart rate, a strong heart rate, and I couldn't sleep yesterday, and but I had no idea why I have like this strong emotions like that. So maybe you can, or maybe you have an idea what's going on.
Sure. Can you talk about what you were thinking about during that time where the emotions were coming up?
Yeah, I thought what I would want to say in the interview, like why I maybe like be the best person for this job, something like that. Yeah.
So you were doubting whether you would be the best person for the job, or you were worried about what you were going to say and how you were going to say it?
I'm worried what I want to say, and because it's like my dream position, but I don't feel like I can get it because it's like for me a little bit too high. But yeah.
Okay. Are you wanting to be perceived by these people in a certain way? Are you worried about them judging you and looking at you in a certain way?
Yeah, a little bit, because I have no experience in football or soccer at all, just in handball. So, and I think there are like different other people. They have more experience in this kind of sport. Yeah.
Okay. So this is related to personal existence view that the mind that we talked about yesterday, where the universal truth of non-self is going to help you with that, where the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way, right? And it's worried about being other people looking at you and judging you. And the things that you need to do are actually in Volume 1, Chapter 16. This is a big topic. This is one that everybody has issues with. So you're going to need to look at Volume 1, Chapter 16. And in there's a whole bunch of things that I teach you about how to get rid of this personal existence view. And this is going to come up in the group learning program in about 3 weeks. I'll be teaching it in the group learning program, but I've taught it many times. So there's already recordings about it. So you could start watching that now, but it's not going to immediately fix the issue before Wednesday, like tomorrow, right? You're going to still have some anxiety and stress. But the thing is now that you see this, you've got the red light on the dashboard of your cars come up. You see this discontentedness, that heart rate that you were talking about, that's the bodily sensations of, hey, the mind's about to get discontent, and that's where you'd like to cut off and let go. But of course, some of these cravings are really strong. You're not going to be able to let it go. You're just going to be trying to cut it off and let it go. Maybe redirecting the mind. That's why probably during the night you were ruminating over this and obsessively thinking about it. But now that you know that this is in there and you've reflected on it, that's what we're doing now, and seeing what is going on. Now you put the plan together, which is number 3. And I've got the plan laid out for you in Volume 1, Chapter 16, because every unenlightened being struggles with this exact same challenge. So that's why I put it together in there for you of exactly what to do. And as you read that, let me know, and I will answer any questions that you have about it.
Thank you. And the next situation, I was a wrestler, and we have to lose a lot of weight, like 10 kilogram in 2 or 3 weeks was normal for us. And now I have like this situation that if I order food, I cannot. It's hard for me to share food. And for example, when we were at the restaurant with the group, and we ordered a lot of food for anybody, I wanted to have my own dish. Like, it's like, I think this is the craving thing. Like I have this, I discussed with Jerry yesterday. He said maybe I have the fear that I couldn't get enough food for myself. But it's really irrational. I don't know if this is the word, like, because, yeah, of course we have here enough food and it's really cheap. Yeah. And I want to work on this topic.
Perfect. So this is a great example where you can see your mind's holding on to the food.
Yeah.
Right. That's the craving. And now what you do for the plan is you share your food. And you did this morning. You shared some food with me.
Yeah.
Remember, right? So you can practice this when you go to lunch, when you go to dinner, in every situation that you can. Offer people food. They may or may not take it, right? Depending on how they're practicing, but you would like to do that frequently. And this is why here in Asia, it's a very common thing that we share our food. Like all the food goes in the middle. Some people call it family style, where that's pretty much the only way that we eat here in Thailand is like all the food goes in the middle and you just share. But in Western culture, we tend to not do that. No. So you can do that though. Like you were Oh no, you weren't at lunch with me yesterday. Like when I go to lunch, even now, I still share my food. I just ask people like, hey, would you like some of this? Would you like some of that? And you share it. And this is really helpful for your mind. So anything like whatever you're eating, you can offer. And you can even do things like buy a little bit of extra so that you can share. Like when I go to this trip on Fridays, I take students to this tour. I think you went to the tour. I usually will get a bunch of extra food just so I can share with others. So you can do those kinds of things too.
Is this something what I should do like more live from now on? Like,
yeah. You'd like to practice generosity. The Buddha talks about how important generosity is, and you'll see it to be true too as you're practicing it. And I noticed this too, that a lot of generosity. You're going to need a lot of generosity to train your mind to let go, not just of this craving, but all your cravings. You're going to need generosity with. So this one is pretty straightforward because your mind's holding on to the food and you can easily share your food, and this is going to help you. And if you need to order a little bit of extra food to be able to share food so that you have the food that you need in order to sustain your health, then do that too. You can do those kinds of things. And you can even do things where like you buy a bunch of food and give it away to an orphanage, or you buy a bunch of food and give it away to a homeless shelter or something like this. Those are things that you can be doing as well.
This could be good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome.
My issue is that I get very frustrated and angry with the way people walk, pedestrians. I walk very quickly, I think. And if people aren't walking on the correct side of the sidewalk, or if they're walking like 4 in a row, or if they stop suddenly, or even the way cars or bicycles are passing me, I just shoot dirty looks at them. So I don't have this problem when I'm driving or biking, but I have it when I'm walking.
Okay. All right. So this is one of the ones that falls into that 10 or 20% category where this is actually going to happen for you naturally, right? Like whenever the discontentedness is coming up, do step number 1, which is cut it off and let it go. You can reflect and see that your mind's craving for these pedestrians and these bicyclists to do things a certain way. That's your craving, desire, attachment. But then in terms of the plan, let me go back. In terms of the plan, number 3, that's going to happen for you automatically. When you go out on the street, people are going to be doing all kinds of things that are going to potentially trigger this. That's what you're essentially doing. You're trying to trigger your cravings so that when the discontentedness is coming up, you can cut it off and let it go. So your mind is going to be in this situation because as you walk through the world, there's going to be countless people coming and going and being around you. So you won't have to induce this, which is what we are talking about here essentially with step number 3 is inducing the triggering of the craving, because it's going to happen for you already. So you can just continue to do what you're doing, which is go out on the street, walk through the street, and then if you notice any discontentedness arising, just cut it off and let it go, and cut it off and let it go, and cut it off and let it go. And then you already know you're craving, and your plan is that I'm just going to keep going down the street, going to keep walking on the street and continue to do this, and life will happen. People will do things that you wouldn't particularly care for, and you're going to have to just understand this is impermanence, that not everybody's going to do things a certain way.
Yeah, like particularly at like the night markets and stuff like that, I find myself getting really frustrated. So I should continue putting myself in those situations.
Yep, okay. Exactly. See, what the mind's doing with its cravings, desires, attachments is it'll have aversion and it'll want to push that away, right? It'll be like, I'm never going to the night markets. But that doesn't solve the problem because the mind still has the craving inside. And this is causing the mind to have lack of concentration, lack of focus. And, you can't go out and navigate the world because let's just say you're out in some city that you don't even know about, and boom, you just happen to find yourself in the middle of a night market, right? And it's like now you're going to be agitated. So it doesn't really solve the problem to push it away. It actually solves the problem to put the mind in the situation. But the mind's going to have a tendency to not want to do this. It'll want to push it away. So you would like to slowly integrate the mind to be comfortable whether you're in a night market or you're not, or you're walking down the street and other people are around or not. So the mind needs this exposure. They actually call this, and they have Western therapy that they call it exposure therapy, right? And this is how the mind can get healed from these kinds of things. So yeah, go do those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Right.
So yesterday we talked about how I was considering like a job offer, and that, you know, there's like a part of me that it's like I know what the quote unquote answer is. I mean, I'm not excited for it. It doesn't serve, you know, my higher purposes, whatever. But I guess the question has to do with, I believe that there's an addiction of some sort or an attachment to things that they should look a certain way, or that the North American definition of success is, you know, kind of been taught over and over again with just being in that society, right? So, but there's a part of me that's still kind of holding on, and I'm not sure if it's from a place of seeking certainty or quote unquote safety in doing the familiar, even though it's like a guaranteed unhappiness, you know, doing it. But it's like, there's almost a part of me that just feels like it's kind of hijacked this system of sorts, where it's like I try to escape it, but it's like a rubber band. It kind of goes back to the shape, like it pulls, you know, me back in. So I'm currently trying to work through that. The answer is going to be no. I have a call tonight, but like there's still that part of me that's just like, oh, I don't know, you know, this unknown outer new path, the unfamiliar, it's kind of scary. So I don't know if you can shed any light on this.
Can you talk specifics? In order to get to a particular plan, you got to really be specific about, you know, what's the situation, what's happening, what's the discontentedness that's being experienced. Can you get into those kind of details?
I could try.
Okay.
The specifics is that there's a job offer that's on the table. And the discontent is that what I'm experiencing is that if I were to take it, there's a part of me that just doesn't feel good. It almost feels like I'm trapping myself into something I know is not good for me. Mm-hmm. And I believe the attachment is the familiarity of it. That
you know the job really well, it wouldn't be challenging, it wouldn't be motivating.
Right.
Okay. So your mind has a craving to be challenged and motivated? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, like I think there's a craving of something that's more meaningful, perhaps something that's more in line with my more natural interests and talents.
Mm-hmm. So this type of job, you've done it before, and there's nothing about it that's going to be interesting to you because there's no new things that you're actually going to be doing.
Right.
That's right. Okay. All right. So it sounds like the mind is craving this, you know, constant change, constant, you know, even though there's a craving for permanence that the unenlightened mind has, it can crave things to be constantly changing too, right? So the mind can be wanting stimulation through things that are constantly changing and being challenged. So you're going to be challenged in certain positions if you choose to look for those kinds of positions. But then ultimately that position too, let's just say it's a brand new position and you've never done this job ever in your life. Within a matter of a year or two or three, you'll probably master that particular job, right? Because you've done it enough times. So you're going to need to get comfortable with, yeah, there's going to be certain times where I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm understanding and I'm challenged in a particular area, but then I'm going to eventually master it and I'm going to know it inside and out, backwards of my hands. I can't always be having a job that's going to be something new, because otherwise you're just going to keep jumping around, hopping from thing to thing to thing. So you need to find that thing, that job, that livelihood that you feel enthused about and you feel like, hey, if I master this, I would still enjoy doing it. Because I had this same thing too at one time where I wanted constant challenge, constant different things, and, you know, moving around from job to job to job. But now, like with the Buddhist teachings, like some of you guys hear me when I teach in class, it's the same examples, it's the same description, it's the same talk that I give in each one of these classes about a certain topic, but I just thoroughly enjoy giving that topic. There's nothing challenging for me anymore in teaching the teachings of the Buddha, because it's the same teachings. It's the same thing that I need to say to every single student as they tell me what their challenges are. There's little differences from student to student, but it's the same exact teachings. So you're going to need to get to the point of getting a certain skill, being comfortable with that skill, know that you're doing it really well, and be comfortable in doing that and still be enthused and motivated to do it. So this isn't something that you need to put together a specific plan for, other than to figure out what is it that motivates you? What is it that you're enthused about? What is it that you will have ambition around? And then understand that you're not looking for passion, because that's one of the things that you've said when we were talking about your job is like, I just don't have the passion for this job. And that's sometimes what we think that we need for a job. But when we talk about passion, that's craving, desire, attachment. That's what that is. So if you're looking for a relationship with passion, or you're looking for a job with passion, that's going to burn out. And then you're going to be left with this job that you otherwise don't like, or you're going to be left with this partner who you otherwise don't enjoy being around because the passion has burned out. And that's why we call it the three fires. That craving burns out, and now you feel bored and miserable in this job or in this relationship. So you're not looking for something you have passion about. You're looking for something that you're encouraged about, that you have motivation about, but it's not the passion that you're looking for. So be attentive to that.
Cool. And then I have a second thing as well that I'm curious about. Every now and then I don't know, be like walking around, going about my day, and then I will almost like out of nowhere hear a certain voice or get like a certain feeling of something, and I'm just like, whoa, where'd that even come from? You know? Yeah. And so when it comes to that kind of scenario where it's almost like really out of nowhere, like nothing really happened that might have, you know, been the source of that and caused it, I'm kind of curious about, you know, from that angle, like, okay, yes, definitely cutting it off. Like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Okay, no, we're not indulging in that. No problem. But when it comes to trying to get to the root of it or the source of it, like, how does one do that?
Are these unwholesome thoughts, or are they wholesome thoughts?
They are wholesome or unwholesome.
Or wise or unwise?
Unwise thoughts.
They're unwise. Okay. So there's beings that are formless beings in the hell realm and the afflicted spirit realm that are going to constantly be trying to influence calamity and unwholesome things in the world. And they're going to try to influence individual beings to do these unwise things. And this sounds like that's what this is. And there's also beings in the heavenly realm that are formless beings that are trying to influence wholesome things. And even God, if you have an understanding of God, he can share guidance with people that is wise to be able to help them do wholesome things. So this sounds like the either hell beings or afflicted spirits, which are essentially like ghosts. And what you did is exactly what you would like to do, which is cut it off and let it go. Right. And more, you'll purify your mind, and these beings will know that they can't influence you, and they won't try to influence you any longer. When you get to the first jhana, at this point, those beings stop paying attention to you because they know that you have too much wisdom and your mind is too well trained that they won't try to influence you anymore after that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other? Yep.
So, David, sometimes I struggle to see like the line between an aversion and the wise decision. So, for example, I feel aversion to like hell beings. I don't want to associate with them. But if I try to like force myself into a contact, that's potentially unwise, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe another like very light example would be the mind doesn't want any tattoos on the body. I've never wanted any tattoos. So, maybe I should actually force myself to get a tattoo. but maybe it's not the wisest decision because potentially like in the ink, there may be some poisonous ingredients. You understand, right? Could you please guide me through this?
Yeah, so whenever you're wanting or expecting other beings, even afflicted spirits or hell beings, to be a certain way or do a certain thing, that's your craving, desire, attachment. And you would like to understand you can't control other beings and what other people say, what other people do, how other people act or operate. You're going to see all different kinds of things in the world. And the more wise you become, you're going to see a whole lot of unwise things happening in the world. And you're going to need to get more and more comfortable with understanding that these beings, they just lack wisdom and they're making unwise decisions. And you made those same unwise decisions in the past too. Either in this life or some previous life, you've made these unwise decisions. And just have loving kindness and compassion for them, that they're having certain challenges and certain struggles. So you can't control what any being does, including formless beings of hell or afflicted spirits. In terms of like, if you're not interested in having a tattoo on the body, there's no harm if somebody chose to have a tattoo, but this is personal existence view. When somebody is putting a tattoo on the body, the mind is thinking that this body is me, and now I'm going to decorate it in a certain way. So if someone has a tattoo, it doesn't mean they've done anything wrong or they've done anything bad. Or if someone chooses to go get a tattoo after they're on the path to enlightenment, that's their choice. But you choosing not to get a tattoo is your mind saying, hey, I'm not interested in having personal existence view and putting a tattoo on this body because I would just like to leave it the way it is. So in these kinds of situations, you don't have to go out and get a tattoo just because you're not interested in having a tattoo. Understand that if somebody does have a tattoo, that doesn't mean they've done anything wrong or anything bad. It's just that that's what they would like to do. And there's essentially two ways to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment. What I'm teaching you here, this is how to cut it off and let it go, and how to purge it out of the mind and eradicate it so that it's no longer subject to future arising, right? This is what the Buddha teaches you. There's actually another way to eliminate cravings, and you can do this with some cravings, which is to actually fulfill it. This is a way to actually eliminate a craving. So like if you have a craving to go to the Philippines and you've always wanted to go to the Philippines and gosh, you just can't wait to go to the Philippines. You're urging to go there someday. Well, one of the ways to eliminate it is to cut it off and let it go. You can cut it off and let it go. And that might take a while to do that. But another way to eliminate it is just go. Just go to the Philippines. You're not harming anybody, right? You're not harming anyone to go to the Philippines. So just go to the Philippines if you like, check it out, walk around, do all the things you're going to do. And you're like, all right, been there, done that. I don't have that craving anymore. That's one of the ways to eliminate it. So some people have a craving for a tattoo. You don't have that, but some people do. And one of the ways to eliminate it is just to get one or two or three. But this is where the mind has to be very careful, because if there's a craving for a tattoo, it might become, 50, 60, 70, just like keep going and going and going and going. And the mind just wants more and more and more. That's the unquenchable thirst that the mind has with something like a tattoo and other things. It can happen with, all kinds of different things that the mind can have cravings for. So if someone's using this technique of fulfilling it in order to eliminate it from the mind, you have to be sure that it's okay. I'm going to the Philippines, but that doesn't mean I'm then going to go to Hong Kong and I'm going to go to this place and that place and that place. And you just find yourself traveling for 20 years and you're just trying to extinguish this craving, and you're just endlessly traveling, going into debt perhaps, and all these other kinds of issues. So if you're going to use this method of fulfilling it in order to extinguish it, you got to be attentive to know, like, okay, it's going to be the Philippines and then Hong Kong, and then I'm completely done, and that's all the travel I ever need to do. Doesn't mean you won't ever travel, but those are the places you have a real burning desire to go to, and that's how you extinguish those cravings. So in your situation with the tattoo, you're not interested in getting one, I would say just don't get one then, and then you'll be fine. Yeah. One thing I'll add, though, that might be actually helpful for this, I just thought of it. You could get a temporary tattoo, right? Like one of those ones that rub off after a while, or like a henna. You know what a henna is? Because maybe the mind doesn't want something on the body. You could get one of these little temporary ones and just kind of see how it works and train the mind like, hey, it's okay. It's just temporary. Every tattoo is temporary. right? They're all impermanent. Even the ones that have ink, they fade, right? And eventually the skin's going to dissolve and that tattoo is going to be gone. So they're all really, truly temporary tattoos. But I would suggest maybe getting an actual temporary tattoo that is only going to be there for a week or two. And that'll train the mind to get over this discomfort. Mm-hmm. Anything else you guys would like to talk about on this topic? Oh, yes, sir. And those of you guys online, you guys can join the conversation as well by putting it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and contribute to the discussion or get help if you'd like.
Okay, kind of related to the last craving that we mentioned. It's like I have a craving for especially experiences that brings or triggers like positive feelings. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's a craving because when I don't have them, I feel discontent. And that becomes particularly relevant in situations like, okay, now we're traveling around Thailand. When my wife, friends are coming, I want absolutely everything that we do to be memorable somehow. So it has to always have to be, I wanted to say a happy ending, but maybe this is the right place to mention that. But that I kind of have that craving, like everything has to be perfect. Everyone has to have fun, beautiful experiences, pleasant experiences. And if I don't get them, I feel like, damn. So I don't know what the plan is. I know I have the craving, but I don't have a plan. So should I engage in experiences that do not bring positive feelings? I have no idea.
Okay. So yeah, this is one of those 10 or 20% things as well, that it will happen, right? You're not going to be able to be in a situation where every experience you have is a positive experience. So as you go through life, you will experience this for yourself. You don't have to induce this one. This isn't one that you really can induce. So the way these teachings work is you learn these teachings and you're growing and you're developing and you bring your life up to the point where you're practicing these teachings. And then you need to live your life for an extended period of time with those teachings so that then the mind can be trained to let these things go. Right. So before we were on the path to enlightenment, if you had an experience where it was a negative experience, you're just like, that was a negative experience and I don't want to do that ever again, or whatever your mind was doing. Right. Where now when you're learning these teachings and you're building up your practice, and now when you have a negative experience and you're noticing the discontentedness arising, you have the skills now to know to cut that off and let it go. And you have the breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity on board that you're practicing. So you're going to need to live your life for an extended period of time through these teachings in order to train your mind to let go of these kinds of things. And this one, it's going to happen naturally by itself. You're not going to have to induce it. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, any others that you guys would like to talk about? Let's see if we have anything online. Okay. It's getting close to lunch, right? Yeah, we're going to actually get... You have a question, Frank? Or something you would like to talk about? Is it this thing or is it something else? Is it about this?
Relevant.
It's about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's connected to what I was previously saying about just out of nowhere, just hearing like a certain voice or a feeling. Mm-hmm. Because then there are times when I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like something my dad would say, right? And so I think I'm curious whether there's a certain attachment or meaning or aversion or something that's still within where, it'll kind of just show up every now and then. And I'm like, whoa, that was a random, discouraging, feeling. And I'm not even doing anything relevant to that statement, Sorry, I can't really get more specific into that.
Yeah, so with your mindfulness and your awareness of mind, whenever you see anything unwholesome, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. So if you're out and about in your day and this random thought from your childhood comes up and you even say this in your speech and you realize it was unwise, take note of that and then cut that off and don't allow the mind to do that in the future. The Buddha teaches you that if there's something that you're about to do and you know that it's going to cause harm to others, harm to yourself, or harm to both, then don't do that thing. And then he says, while you're doing something, if it's going to cause harm to others, harm to you, or harm to both, then stop doing that thing. And then he says, afterwards, when you've done a certain action or verbal action or so forth, he says, reflect on it. Did it cause harm to others, to you, or to both? And if it did, then don't do that thing again, right? Because anytime you're causing harm, this harm is going to come back to you. So these random statements that you're having, they're probably coming from your subconscious mind, and they're just coming out, and you need to take note of that and then train your mind to not do those things, that you can restrain it. Because prior to the second jhana, we just talked about the jhanas just briefly yesterday. Those are those preliminary phases that your mind goes through on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. In the second jhana, you'll have what's called unification of the mind, or oneness of mind, where there no longer will be a subconscious mind and a conscious mind. It'll just be one whole mind. And this is what you need in order to be able to purify the mind, because the conscious mind is polluted, but the subconscious mind is very polluted. And the subconscious mind, you don't really have awareness of prior to the second jhana, that it'll just throw things up to the conscious mind. And this is where you'll just blurt things out. And you're like, why did I say that? I didn't mean that. I don't think that way. So if you've ever been in a conversation and you just blurted something out, and you're like, why did I say that? That was so crazy of me. Like, I don't think that way. Why did I say that? That's your subconscious mind throwing things up into your conscious mind. So eventually you'll get full awareness of the entire mind, and you'll be able to purify your mind of all those kinds of things. But for now, if you ever notice those things coming up, just take note of it, cut it off, let it go. If you need to apologize, and then aim to do better. But continue with the Eightfold Path so that you can get closer and closer to that second jhana, and you can have this unification of the mind, and you'll be able to see the whole mind more clearly.
And then and add on to that, if we have time, is, so I feel like in like modern whatever pop psychology, because that's what we should go for, is this notion of honoring all parts of yourself. All emotions are welcome. All parts are welcome, right? And I'm trying to listen to that and say, of course, like not rejecting ourselves, not adding more judgment, not being unkind to ourselves is important. But then, when we're talking about this, I definitely agree with this in terms of like, don't indulge in certain thoughts or feelings or whatnot if they don't serve us, if they're unwholesome, right? How does Buddhism kind of, address this part of honoring all parts of ourselves, right? Like the emotions of whatever, even if they don't serve us.
Okay. So inherently in the teachings of the Buddha, there's the understanding that you're not born perfect, that you're not a perfect being at this point. The whole reason why you're born is because the mind had pollutions in your previous life. So therefore there's this rebirth, and you're born imperfect. That's why as soon as we come out of our mom's stomach, we start crying, right? Because we have craving. We're in the stomach, or in the womb. Everything's going so perfectly for us. We're just kicked back. We're relaxed. We're getting our food. We're getting everything, and things couldn't be more perfect. And next thing you know, here comes these labor pains, and we get pushed out into the world, and right, we're discontent right away. As soon as we come into the world, because of our craving, we're craving that permanence. We're wanting to be in that womb permanently, right? The mind's craving this permanence, and now when we experience this change, the being doesn't like it, and that's why we're born crying, right? So it's the teachings of the Buddha. He's not degrading you or diminishing you or telling you you're less of a person or anything like that, but there's this inherent understanding that you're born imperfect and that you have these defilements, you have these pollutions in your mind. But now the goal is to understand what those are, understand the natural laws of existence around you, and now train your mind and purify it to get to the point where the mind is perfect, where this is a perfect being. An enlightened being is a perfect being. They're functioning perfectly. They're not causing any harm to anybody in any way. And now because of that, their mind is completely peaceful, completely joyful, no anger, no sadness, no frustration or irritation. But you need to be able to acknowledge that there's certain imperfections currently that exist in this mind and with this being, in order to then aim to do better, use the tools and techniques that the Buddha taught to purify those things and get to this better existence where in this human existence, you can become this perfect being. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't think of yourself as perfect, because that would be conceit and arrogance, but you just know that you've purified your mind, and you get to what's called final knowledge. What final knowledge is where you've cultivated all the wisdom of the path to enlightenment, and you fully understand the entire path. And now you've attained what's called final knowledge. And you'll know that you've attained this because you won't experience any discontentedness any longer. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so forth. And you won't have any anger. There's no sadness. There's no frustration, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. And you'll know you've attained final knowledge because your mind's been completely transformed and you're not experiencing any discontentedness anymore. And you fully know the path to enlightenment at that point. And you're now functioning in the world as what we would say a perfect being, because you're now not causing harm to others through your intentions, your speech, or your actions. But it's a gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So the idea that some people have that, we need to embrace these imperfections. We need to, some people even teach that, you're a perfect being already. You just need to get comfortable with that and accept this. This isn't wise, because there's obviously things that you're doing where you're argumentative, or might be bitter, harsh, or hostile towards people, or you're irritated or annoyed. These are all the imperfections of the mind and the pollutions of the mind that need to be purified. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind will be completely purified, and you will be performing as a perfect being. You won't be causing harm to anybody whatsoever. But you won't think of yourself that way, because that would be conceit. But you'll just know that that is what's occurring. The mic's not on.
Does the Buddha say anything around, okay, if we're born kind of as another go around towards enlightenment, right? And we're kind of born with at a certain level, we'll say, right? Like things to still work on. But as we know, not everyone is born into a same nurturing environment or a family, right? And in fact, I feel like there are more pollutions that kind of can get added on during a child's growth and upbringing before they leave home. Does the Buddha say anything about that? Do you have a perspective on, that perhaps like some people getting more challenges, more pollutions to work on and remove, more cravings, desires, attachments to eradicate?
Okay, so everything that we experience is a result of our decisions. Oftentimes we blame other people in the unenlightened state for the things we experience, but everything we experience, wholesome or unwholesome, it's because of decisions that we're making. So any family that we're born into, this is a result of decisions that we've made in a prior life, that we're now born into this particular family. And now that we're in that particular family, we're going to experience certain things. There's no being that's controlling all of this. This is just cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. It's our karma, or some people call it karma. But it's not punishments or rewards. So if you grew up in a hostile home life and had a difficult childhood, you weren't being punished. It's just that because of the causes and conditions, one event led to the next, to the next, to the next, and now you're born in this particular family. And now in that particular family, as a living being, you're going to have all 10 of those fetters, those 10 fetters. Every being has all those fetters. But the amount of those fetters that you have is going to be different from person to person. So someone could have more sensual desire than another. Somebody could have more conceit or ego than another. But these are all the results of your decisions that's coming to that, that's producing that. And it's also the result of your decisions to eliminate them. That's why you have to be able to make the choice that you're interested in getting to enlightenment, that somebody can't force you to get to enlightenment. It's your decisions that's going to lead to enlightenment. So whether your mind is more polluted or less polluted, these are decisions that you're making. What family you're born into, this is decisions that you're making, not that specific family, but you're making certain decisions that lead to that. And then whether your mind gets purified or not, these are decisions that you're making as well. All right. Yep.
So I've got a friend who was adopted as a baby, and she was sexually abused by her adoptive father permanently. It was very hard for me to find out about that story and what could possibly cause such a rebirth.
So you're not, when you're being reborn, it's not like a one for one. It's not like, she sexually abused somebody in her previous life, so therefore she's going to get sexually abused now, right? It's like, it's not this punishment and rewards. That's not what the Buddha teaches. But instead, there's the sequence of events, and that she had the opportunity, potentially in a previous life, if she was in the human realm or the heavenly realm, she had the opportunity to get to enlightenment, because in those existences, you can get to enlightenment. And for one reason or another, the choice was made and the individual didn't get to enlightenment in that previous life. So they were born into the situation that they were in, and now there was a sequence of events that led to that. But the Buddha teaches that the exact karma, if you were to try to discern in certain situations, he said it would lead to madness or frustration. So like if we said like, okay, I punched my friend in the face, so what is the exact thing that will happen because of that? This would lead to madness or frustration. So there's obviously certain general things that we can look at that we know it's unwise to punch someone in the face, because they're more likely to punch us back. They might have a knife and stab us. They might have a gun. Their friends and family might attack us. But the exact result of that, you can't discern it. So the Buddha says if you tried to discern it, it would lead to either madness or frustration. So in a situation like this, we know that she didn't get to enlightenment and she was reborn, and she ended up having the sequence of events that led to her adoption. But exactly what she did in order that led to that particular sexual abuse, it's not discernible. It would lead to madness or frustration if we tried to figure it out. But it's important to know that it's not that she chose this in terms of like she's not choosing to become sexually abused, right? Or she's not being punished for that. This is just a sequence of events that led from one thing to the next. And now that it has occurred, it's like, okay, let's train the mind, if she would like to train the mind to let that go and not define who she is today as an individual through those things. So it's not like blame or fault. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you. But there is a sequence of events that leads to any particular thing that we experience. And then as a child, we're oftentimes experiencing things that we don't have the wisdom to counteract. Like now, if somebody tried to sexually abuse her as an adult, she would be able to stop that from occurring. But as a young child, she didn't have the ability to do that. So it has occurred. So now that it has occurred, it's important to train the mind to not cling to it and define yourself through that, or think negatively like I'm to blame or I'm at fault, because she's not to blame or she's not at fault, but it has happened. But now that it has happened, it's important to make sure the mind doesn't cling to it and hold on to it, so that she can gain some peacefulness and joy, even though this thing's happened in the past. Because what the mind will do is it'll hold on to these experiences. And now in the present moment, you'll have painful feelings based on something that happened in the past. And we refer to this as trauma nowadays, but that isn't permanent. You can eliminate that from the mind if you train the mind to let go. That any kind of experience that you've had that we refer to as trauma, you don't have to continue to experience painful feelings for those things over and over and over again. Through training the mind, you can let it go.
Thank you. And in her case, she let go of the trauma, explaining to herself that she had chosen this particular incarnation in order to learn some life lessons. But that's also incorrect, right?
You don't choose the exact rebirth, but the choices that you make do lead to whether or not you're going to be reborn or not. And now that we're born, the goal would be to cultivate as much wisdom as you can through learning the natural laws of existence and training your mind to remove the pollutions that are causing the discontentedness. And then having done so in this current life, the mind will be peaceful and joyful, and there won't be any rebirth. There won't be another life. And that's what an individual can ultimately get to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Some more hands.
Yeah, just really quickly following up on that. In general, how should we view more privileged people than us or less privileged people than us when it comes to karma? Like, that's my question.
Yeah, the Buddha teaches about this, and you can independently verify it for yourself that, if somebody, let's just say, is rich and wealthy and famous, right? There's certain decisions that they made that led to that. And if somebody has disadvantage or, impoverished, there's certain decisions that led to that. And being born into a family that's even impoverished, there's certain decisions that led to that. And the thing that you would like to do is you would like to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for all these beings. And one of the things that Buddha teaches you to be able to help you do that and also help you eliminate any craving for those things, because sometimes people have jealousy because they're craving to be famous or rich or something like this, is the Buddha teaches you that anything that you see somebody experiencing that they're experiencing good fortune, he says you've already experienced this at some point in the past because you've lived so many countless lives that you've already experienced that. And the same thing with misfortune too, that when you see somebody having unfortunate circumstances, he says you've already experienced that same thing too, either in this life or some previous life. So this can help you arise loving kindness and compassion for disadvantaged beings. And it can help you eliminate craving to wanting that better thing that somebody else has. If you realize like, I already owned a Ferrari in the past, right? I already was rich and famous, or I was already a king or a queen in the past. I don't need to do that now. Let me just find my peace and joy in the present moment based on this current existence. So that's how that can help you. I saw some other hands too. You had a question too? If you could use a microphone, that'll help us. We have people online.
So maybe I misunderstood, but it sounds like the Buddha didn't provide a mechanism, or doesn't really, maybe he or she didn't understand how the decisions you make in this life will affect your next one.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
So does the Buddha not understand or provide a mechanism for how the decisions you make in this life will affect your next one? So is it possible that it could be random? You could live a great life, and follow the path pretty well, but end up in a terrible situation the next one?
That's not true. The Buddha did provide guidance that shows you the natural law of karma and teaches you how to make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results and unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. This is the whole core central part of his teachings. But in terms of exact, that's where he says it would lead to madness or frustration. So like if you said like, okay, if I steal that car, what's going to happen to me in this life or some future life? Like exact, we couldn't discern. But we can say, nowadays we could say, okay, you're most likely going to be arrested. Maybe that person that you stole the car from is going to find you. You might get beat up. You might get murdered. At the very least, people are probably going to steal from you. These are things that we can generally talk about, and we know that it's unwise to steal. So we can talk like that, and we can understand these wise decisions that lead to wholesome results and unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But getting to the exact thing that is going to happen to you, if you do this, then this will exactly happen. That's going to be that would be permanence, and we understand that that's not possible to have. But we can look at this as a collection of things that are potentially able to happen, either wholesome or unwholesome. We can look at that. And if you do practice the path closely, you'll either get to enlightenment in this life, or there's the potential you'll get to enlightenment in your future lives. You can see that your mind is getting closer and closer to enlightenment in this life because your mind's becoming more peaceful and more joyful. That's one of the beauties about the teachings of the Buddha, is that you have indication in this life that what he's teaching you is the truth and it's working because your mind's becoming more and more peaceful. Where oftentimes what you experience is a collection of teachings will be, okay, believe all these things and then something great's going to happen when you die. But you have no indication in your present life whether those things are actually true or not, because you're just believing them. You don't know what's true or false. But the Buddha is teaching you not to believe anything, and instead learn, reflect, independently verify, and practice the teachings. And as you practice and you uproot these pollutions out of your mind, you'll see your mind becoming more peaceful and more joyful. So you'll have indications in this life that you're making wiser and wiser decisions, and you're experiencing more and more wholesome results. And one of those wholesome results is the condition of the mind's becoming more peaceful and more joyful. Your relationships are becoming more harmonious, and you'll see these kind of benefits. So he did provide this kind of guidance. And then kind of a little bit about what you were asking is like, let's just say you fall short of enlightenment in this life, but you've been practicing the teachings for a period of time. Anything that you've learned and practiced in this life, your mind will retain that wisdom so that in your next life, it'll be that much easier for you should you end up deciding that you are not deciding, or should you not get to enlightenment in this life, there's the ability that the teachings and the wisdom that you're cultivating in this life is going to help you in your future life. And sometimes when people come and learn with me here, the teachings just make sense to them. They're like, oh wow, this is like so straightforward. It just makes so much sense. And oftentimes this is someone who's been learning and practicing in a previous life. And then in other cases, people really struggle and they have a lot of difficulties to understand. And this is an individual that most likely wasn't practicing the teachings in the past. So either way, whatever you're learning and growing and doing in this life, it's going to help you in this life. And it's also going to help you in a future life should there need to be future rebirths. And the Buddha never uses rebirth as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into learning his teachings, because remember, he's already peaceful, he's already joyful. He's not trying to convince you to do any one particular thing. But should you fall short of enlightenment, yeah, you're going to benefit from what it is that you're learning here in this life as well. Mm-hmm. Yep. Leo, you have a question? Oh, you're dead? Okay. All right. So it's 12:15. Are you guys good with an hour and a half lunch today? Yeah, you guys are good with that? Okay. So I know yesterday we didn't get our hour and a half lunch in. So today we're going to do hour and a half. So hour and a half from now will be 1:45. So when we come back at 1:45, I'm going to start with meditation. We'll start our meditation session, and then I'm going to teach you the 4 healthy mental states. They're referred to as Brahma Viharas. This is where you're learning loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. This is where the Buddha gets the description of being like a doctor, because I'm going to teach you about certain symptoms you're going to see in your mind, and then there's these certain antidotes or certain remedies with the Brahma Viharas. So I'm going to teach you about these kinds of things so you can be your own doctor, and where you see certain symptoms coming up in your mind, you can apply the remedy or the antidote. So if you'd like to do some meditation and learn this, I'll be starting at 1:45. So enjoy your lunch, and perhaps we'll see you afterwards, okay? Enjoy. Mm-hmm.